Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to continue the series on Anatoly Karpov. We are still at the age of 10 and we are still going through his games from the 1961 USSR Junior Championship. So he was 10 years old and he really wasn't himself just yet. I mean, he was still a very good player, but he wasn't as experienced, of course, and as powerful as he was only a few years later. When he was 12, he was already accepted into the Botovnik chess school, and by that point he was already a monster. At the age of 10, he still had a lot of work to do. So in this game he has black against Gennady Timoschenko, excuse me, a Russian player from Chelyabinsk, who was also a kid at the time, very young. Later on he went on to become a strong grandmaster himself. He became an IM in 76 and the GM in 1980. Okay, so Timoschenko plays e4. We have the French from Karpov. We have d4, d5, and knight to d2. And this position is actually very thematic for Anatoly Karpov, but with colors reversed. He used to play the Tarrasch against the French, and he drove Korchnoi crazy. If you look at their games from the 78 World Championship match, Korchnoi actually didn't know what to do against the opening, and he tried bishop e7, bishop d7, he tried everything. Korchnoi usually played c5, the open Tarrasch, and in the positions which occur out of the opening, so this is just the main line, e takes d, queen takes d, knight g to f3, c takes d4, bishop c4, queen to d6, and now castles, and then later on you continue with knight to b3. You either get this position where black is simply slightly positionally worse, or you get a position with an isolated queen pawn. And Korchnoi kept on losing those positions. He just kept on losing and couldn't do anything. Couldn't keep the position equal. He almost never drew with black. So this is very thematic for Karpov. In this game he had black, and he played the transposition to the Rubinstein. Of course, probably objectively the best move is knight f6, playing the closed Tarrasch. Now, I've been on the white side of this in every tournament game I played against the French, so this is my favorite variation against the French. And the one I hate the most is d takes e4, transposing into the Rubinstein, because as white you want to play for an advantage. And after this happens, you really don't have an advantage. This position is just equal. So knight f3, knight f3. Knight g to f6, and now invites a trade. Here white could play bishop d3, white could play bishop g5, white could play knight to g3. We saw a Tal game the other day where Michal Tal played knight to g3. In this game Timoschenko played knight takes f6. We have knight takes f6, and now this is a perfectly even position. The only problem black has is his bishop on c8. Now, one thing I would like to mention, since I'm going over the Queen's Indian series now, there's a way to enter a position very similar to the Queen's Indian, except white doesn't have the e4 pawn, so he's not going for e4 because he doesn't have it, and that position can be achieved after g3, b6. This is a very interesting setup. Usually black plays in a sort of Tartakower Queen's Gambit declined or Queen's Indian defense fashion with this bishop on b6, and this is a very thematic, interesting position where black should play for c5, and very dynamic with the pressure on the long diagonal for both sides. Okay, other than that, white could also play c3, bishop g5, bishop d3. Bishop d3 is probably the main move, just preparing to castle. In the game, Timoschenko played bishop e3, which is okay. The slight problem with the move bishop e3 is the move knight g4, but if black is willing to do that, then he's probably wasting a bit too much time. Bishop e7, bishop to d3 now, and here Karpov plays a very weird move. And I should say, there are a couple of points in this game which are very, very un-Karpov-like, and which I just couldn't believe. For example, his next move, like a6. At a6 I just couldn't understand. I can understand b6 and playing for bishop b7. That's fine. That's a very good move. In fact, I believe that's the best move you could play. Just b6, knight e5, bishop b7, or white castles, you play bishop b7. Nothing wrong with that. a6 I find very hard to explain. For example, if you want to play b5 and bishop b7, why is this expansion so important? If I'm white, I think I would just play c4 to prevent the easy b5. The only reason why I would consider a6 and b5 and bishop b7 instead of b6, bishop b7, which is one move faster, if I'm afraid of c4, which I'm not, because I want to play c3 anyway. So a6 I can't explain. Obviously castles was better, or b6. White castles, now Karpov castles as well, and white plays the move knight e5, a very thematic attacking move in this Rubinstein French, because you have a pawn on d4, you use the e5 square as an outpost. And black plays knight d5. Now, knight d5 I understand, trying to attack the bishop. The problem is that the bishop could have retreated to d2, which Timoschenko didn't play, which is a mistake. Of course, you don't want to give up your bishop pair. But I still think Karpov has better options. c5 and b5 are both very interesting. c5 is a temporary pawn sack, dc5, and queen d5, attacking the pawn, attacking the knight, I think was very interesting. So something like bishop f4 and bishop c5, I think was more than equal for black. And then also b5, if you played a, then you play b. You played a6, you play b5, bishop b7, and that would make a ton of sense. The problem is you give up your dark squared bishop, but I don't think that's such a big deal. Let's say queen f3, rook b8, bishop b7, and you play on the queen side. Okay, but knight d5 is okay. c4, knight e3, Timoschenko gave up the bishop, so why not take? Bishop f6. I should say that a very interesting idea here would have been to play f5 and bishop f6 later. That would have restrained this bishop and protected h7. Usually when there's no easy way to put pressure on e6, that's a good idea. So f5 is weakening, of course, but it also sort of restrains white's main attacking piece. But bishop f6 is okay. Rook f3, white starts a crazy attack. Bishop takes e5 was played, and now white simply recaptured. I should say that, well, if you want, you can analyze this. Does bishop h7 work? When I was analyzing the game, I was trying to make bishop h7 work. So you can pause the video and analyze that. Okay, so bishop h7 would actually be a mistake, but it's not clear that white is simply losing. I think that white should be relatively okay after king h7, rook h3. If king g6, then queen h5 check and king f6 and queen takes e5 and king e7 is actually okay. Black should be much better because he has the bishop, but it's not so clear. It's not so clear. I mean, you have, what's that? You have two pawns and this bishop is not a good piece, so. And after rook h3, if king g8, then I think it's slightly better for black. So for example, yeah, okay, you don't have to give up your bishop for nothing. You can just, because you're getting mated, of course you cannot save your bishop, but you can take on h2, and after king h2 you can now play f5. So now it's only one pawn and black should be better. But yeah, very interesting. Bishop h7 is something you would have to consider here. But d5 played straight away. Queen g5 attacking the e5 pawn. Queen c2 gaining a tempo on h7. You cannot really take on e5, so h6. Queen c3 now defends e5. And bishop d7, another extremely inexplicable move in my opinion. I mean, why wouldn't you play b6, bishop b7? I just don't understand that. He was maybe afraid of bishop e4, but b6, bishop e4, rook b8, and you're happy to trade off these two. It's the French defense. You're fine with that. So instead he played bishop d7, which doesn't make too much sense to me. White could have played bishop e4 anyway. And what do you do then? Bishop c6, bishop c6, bc6, your pawn structure is ruined. Rook g3 attacks the queen, queen e7. Rook f1, putting up pressure, and now bishop e8, which this is worse than a6. He's trying to defend a pawn that's already defended 3 times. An active move would have been bishop c6. Of course, as I said, as you could probably see from the title, Karpov was absolutely dominated this game. So white wants to do this, bishop b1, and then queen d3 or queen c2 and try to mate, provoke g6. After bishop b8, that's easier. Bishop b1, and now already Karpov panicked with g6. Now you're making weaknesses. What do you do when your opponent creates a weakness? Well, you occupy it, rook f6. And this is just a crushing position. Of course, you could still defend, but it's very hard. These rooks, if you compare the quality of the rooks and the bishops, I mean, there's no discussion. This is just dynamically winning for white. All of his pieces are better than all of black's pieces. King safety, rook activity, bishop activity, queen activity. The only thing that's worse for white is the pawn structure and the fact that sometimes in the future this king could be weak and the back rank could be weak. Okay, Karpov plays king h7. h4, very normal, just trying to break open the position. h5. Rook g5, he created a weakness on g5, so occupy the square. Look at this, this is aesthetically very pleasing. If you showed me this game and asked which side was Karpov, or if you created a survey or of some sorts, I think 99% of people would say that Karpov is white. His games usually look like this. King g7 played. I mean, just a dreadful position. Queen c2, and now pressure on g6. I mean, bishop e8 makes sense now, but he shouldn't have allowed it in the first place. Rook h8, queen to e2 played. White is slowly creeping up. Queen c5, b3 defending the pawn, very solid. Rook d8, and now some threats are being introduced. So with this rook on d8, Karpov is in some positions threatening to take the bishops, if the pieces move away from the f file, and he's also preparing something like rook d2, maybe queen takes e3. Okay, queen e7 played, defending everything, and now g4. And g4 is a good move, but it's a terminal weakening of the king, and it could lead to problems if you make a single mistake. So in this position, Karpov played queen d7, which is a very good move. Now, he is threatening a deadly infiltration, and it's not easy to see why it's so strong, but it is so strong. The move queen d2, in combination with the rook on d8 and with the rook on the h file, and with the bishop on c6, could lead to checkmate. So Karpov has only 4 pieces, which all seemed passive like 3 moves ago. They're all perfect now because of the move g4. So the move g4 allowed for this to happen. It allowed for this bishop to be much more powerful on the diagonal. So I would like to take a brief moment, just look at the position before and after g4. After g4, all of black's pieces, which were horrible before g4, are just great. And queen d7 is a perfect move. And in fact, white blunders the game away immediately. He plays the move queen takes b7. And after queen takes b7, the game is just over. So what you have to do here is queen to d2. It's not clear why. Fine, you're attacking the pawn. Fine, you're going to open this and take here, or play bishop c6 and threaten mate. For example, let's say everything is just defended with queen e4, which I think is the best move. You play queen e2, attacking here, preparing rook d1. It's not easy to defend this. Let's say rook f2. Objectively the best move. Rook d1 check, king to g2, and now simply queen e1. This infiltration is deadly, absolutely deadly. Bishop to c2 attacks the rook, fine. Just play bishop to c6, perfect. Because if queen takes bishop, then of course queen h1 check. So for example, queen c6, there is no better move. Here check, let's say king g3 and queen takes queen. And after bishop takes rook, I mean, you can just come back to h1 and eventually you will win. So queen d2 was extremely powerful. What Karpov played was also really good. Let me just mention that queen takes on b7 is a horrible move, but it's really hard to avoid what was going on. Let's say he plays queen f2, which seems like it's a sensible move. Now you can just continue queen d1 check, and after something like queen f1, you can just take h takes g4. And you're still in a lot of trouble, you're still losing. Because the h file is open, because the bishop is coming to c6, because your bishop is hanging, because this rook doesn't really have anywhere to go. So what he should have done is a very strange move, queen g3. And queen g3 I was struggling to understand, I'm not sure I understand it. So the idea is basically, you're trying to defend all the squares, and if queen d2 now, well, now you can play the move rook f1, trying to defend everything, and if queen e2 preparing rook d2, you can now play queen f4 and try to put pressure on f2. So for example, If rook to d2, you can now take gh5 and everything is defended. The rook is defending g2, the queen is defending h2. Okay, fine, everything is defended. And now, for example, if rook takes h5, you can now play rook takes g6 and play for a draw. But still, I mean, this, fine, I couldn't understand it for 10 minutes when I saw the move, queen g3. A 10-year-old kid, there's no way he would understand that. Okay, but he blundered with queen takes b7, and Karpov didn't play queen d2, he played hg4, which is still crushing, because you can still do all that stuff, but you open up the h file. Okay, rook f1 played. Also, if you play rook takes g4, then I just win your rook. Okay, check and win your rook. If you play queen e4, then I play rook takes h4. Okay, rook f1 played though. Fine. Rook takes h4. Queen e4, trying to defend. Queen to d2, infiltrating. Queen to f4, again trying to save his position, defending the mate here. Defending here, defending here, defending here. Everything is sort of under control. And now, believe it or not, Karpov blew the game away again. He played an inexplicable move. He played king g8. This is probably the only move with which he loses on the spot, which is incredible. So king g8, black resigns. Try to figure out why. You can pause the video. Okay, the reason why he can resign is bishop takes g6. And now if you don't take, you lose. If you play king f8, I just play bishop takes f7. And now eventually you will get mated. You have to give up all your pieces and then get mated. And if you take on g6, f takes g6, then I simply play queen f8, and that's a mate in a few moves. King h7, rook f7 check, bishop takes, king h8. You have to be precise, queen f6, king h7, queen g6, and mate. So king g8 it's a mind-boggling mistake. Makes no sense. This move makes no sense. Okay, but White didn't punish it. He played queen g3. And now Karpov could have finished the game straight away with bishop c6. Just mate on the spot. There's no way to defend. You would have to play something like e4. Or, I don't know. If you play queen f3 or rook f3. Let's say you play rook f3, then I take. And if you take with the queen, then I do this. Wait, is this the fastest? Okay, I can just win the bishop. This is probably the quickest way to win. So he could have finished the game straight away with bishop c6. Instead, he played rook h3, which is still okay. Still an okay move. And now we have queen f4 and queen takes e3. Check, just grabbing material. And queen takes c3, rook takes c3, and he went on to win in the endgame, which, considering how this game went, I mean, it was a roller coaster. Karpov, I'm not saying that the mistakes, like not playing bishop c6 or playing king g8, are the weird part. I think that's okay. It's okay for people to blunder. What I find inexplicable is moves like a6, and bishop e8 and the weird positional moves. So anyway, Karpov just went on to win 2 pawns up. His opponent resigned 3 moves later. So I think this is a very instructive mistake. And again, same as what's happening with Bobby Fischer in this series, I'm very excited to see their development. I had no idea, for example, that Fischer really wasn't good at the age of 12, and that Karpov wasn't a genius at the age of 10, but was at the age of 12. So, for example, if Karpov age 12 played Fischer age 12, Karpov would win 100 out of 100, which is insane. So it's just, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the series as much as I am. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.